Um, well, Zach, I appreciate you coming on and being here. You know, we're both Midwest boys that are trying to start a software company in the outdoor industry, so we've been able to connect over some of the challenges and things that faces. And I've learned a lot from our conversations on the way that you go about things, and really appreciate you being willing to sit down and talk about some of that and get some insights into you as an entrepreneur and also some of your expertise within the fly fishing industry and the outdoor industry as a whole. So appreciate you coming on and doing this, and I'm excited to pick your brain a little bit.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Carter. Should be fun.
So one place that I kind of like to start, and we alluded to this a little bit when we were talking earlier, is I don't think most people wake up one day and just decide to start a business. Most entrepreneurs have kind of a story of how they got there. What is the earliest piece of information that we need to know about you to understand how your entrepreneurial journey has taken you to where you are today? Like, where did this begin?
Yeah, I think for me, at least for the current Trout Routes project, I mean, it really started from my personal journey of fly fishing. I started when the story is I found my grandpa's, who died before I was born, his like bamboo fly rod in an abandoned garage, basically. And I picked it up and was super curious from the beginning. Tried to learn on my own. I didn't have any mentors. I didn't know really what I was doing. And sadly, it actually took me like 6 years of fishing all the time before I caught my first fish, which is terrible. But it goes to show you that, especially in the Midwest where I started fly fishing, um, once you pick up a fly rod, if you're one of us, you just continue to fly fish and you love it. And one of the reasons why you love it is because it brings you to cool places that you otherwise wouldn't go. Gorgeous places, farmlands, pastures. For us, a lot of spring creeks. But one of the challenges I saw from the very beginning is it was always hard for me to know where the trout streams were. And also, a huge issue was public access. And it was a huge part of my fly fishing experience being consumed with not having good access to information. And so, pretty early on, I was pretty passionate about maps and creating my own tools. And it wasn't until 2018 when I actually started thinking through and applying my background in software that there could actually be a pretty cool tool that I think more than just myself would use. And so I've been really kind of thinking about it for probably 10 years. And I finally started tinkering around with the side project in 2018. And a little bit of a further kind of a backstory is a second issue that I always had as a personal angler is I use the stream gauges very often, but I really have a problem with how infrequent they exist. So in other words, like the gauges will be, every 20 miles and there might be streams in between. And I want to know the stream flow for streams that don't have gauges. And so really my first side project was I looked into basically a project to do low cost turbidity sensing. So imagine you can create a hardware startup, because it's kind of a vertical integration play, where you could have like $100 sensor, IoT, it's got solar power, it's got cell, it's got a turbidity sensor on it, and you can install it at every river. All of a sudden, you have a very proprietary, hopefully accurate system that does real-time turbidity sensing. And then you can integrate that with an app and do a full integration. So I looked at all kinds of stuff. By the way, that's very hard. I actually built a pond in my backyard, had a solar panel, had a prototype, looks like a giant pill. Actually got invited to the USGS testing site in Minnesota, and they kicked me out in like 10 minutes. They're like, this thing is a freaking joke. And they proved it to me. Like they had like a full analog sensor output, and they like threw a bunch of dirt at it, and they're like, yeah, this thing sucks. So then I was like, okay, I guess I'll just do my one part, which is maps. And that's truly how Trout Routes started. 6 months later, I launched Trout Routes at the Great Waters Expo in St. Paul.
That's awesome. And that's also, I feel like, not a uncommon story for startup founders, is you had this idea and it didn't really work. So then you kind of pivoted and did something similar, but made it better. That's really cool. I didn't know that about you, actually.
Yeah, funny.
Um, so you started working on Trout Routes in 2018. What were you doing before then?
My background is electrical engineering and software. So I spent a lot of time in a space that people call IoT, which is kind of an overused term for small electronic internet-based things. So Most of that was in the medical space, so leveraging IoT for medical devices. And I spent 10 years doing a hearing aid company looking at basically IoT to lower the cost of hearing aids. So it was a really cool experience to take a very regulated industry that's pretty old school and try to do new tech dev and try to see how to do new product introductions into a market that's very analog and kind of hands-on. And it was a very, very challenging project, but very fun. So part of that was kind of learning how to do, the full IoT tech stack includes apps and software and backend and stuff. So I learned a lot about that stuff. And, in the meantime, I'm on, weekends fly fishing, thinking about all these ideas. I kind of started applying what I was learning through managing tech dev projects at, the medical device space into fly fishing. So bachelor with electrical engineering from University of Minnesota. And then I also got an MBA from Carlson, essentially.
So you were the one who built the software from the very beginning. How long did it take you to build that initial MVP? And walk me through like the first year of the company. How did you launch it? How did you get the first users on it? And then kind of bring me a little bit to where you are today with Trout Routes.
So Trout Routes is really two different core components. There is the consumer software, aka the app. That's the visual thing that you use on your phone. But kind of our core IP is the second part, which is our kind of custom, what we call GIS data. So this is the data that we put together day and night, where we're actually mapping out public lands and trout lines and everything else. And I think that from start to finish, where we launched the MVP for one state with just basic data, I think was about 10 months. And that was a pretty rough 10 months. That was like me working full time, not doing my best at that job because I was so distracted. And we're talking, I'd go to work at 8, come back at 5, and then I would probably work until 1 every night on the weekdays. And I'd work 12 hours, weekends. It was too much. But I was I was very passionate. I couldn't stop. And my thought was like, I think I have something that I love. I think I have something that I can build. I'm pretty sure someone else loves this thing. I would walk into fly shops and I would try and talk to a few people to just say, is this boring? Do you guys actually like this? Is this even worth doing? And every time I talked to someone, their eyes lit up. They were super excited. And I said, I got to try this. I have to try and build this and see what people think at a broader scale. And there's a really big fly fishing expo in the Midwest called Great Waters. And I honestly, in years past, I was intimidated to go there as an angler just because I'm new, I'm young, I kind of feel out of my league. Everyone here knows everything about fly fishing. I don't really even know anything really. And I felt the best way to just send it and launch this thing and see what people really think is to buy a booth. To me, I figured, okay, it sounds like this is like $500. For $500, I can have a dedicated booth and get in front of like 3,000 people. And I just thought it was the best way to get like a core audience to see this thing, give it to them for free, see if people use it, see what people think. And at that show, I just knew this is going to be like a 10-year project because everyone was just absolutely lit up. Everyone was just like, I had questions where people were just like so confused and shocked that something that they just saw was free. And I was like, game over. Like, this is it. So I quit my job 6 months later. And so once you are able to set yourself up to be on a project full time in terms of financially, so assuming that you're not drawing any sort of income or the project is not profitable or even revenue generating yet. For us, it was not. Now you're talking full time, which depending on your personal situation, that can be 60 to 80 hours a week. You can get a lot done in 60 to 80 hours a week for 6 months. And so for the next, we launched just Minnesota for free, just on iOS in March of 2019. And it was just like lights out right away, at least in our local area. In terms of just like great reception, everyone loved it, yada, yada. And so my next step was like, sweet. What if I add Android? What if I add like 7 more states? And then we'll turn on the paywall. So we'll kind of generate as much buzz as we can, get everyone hooked for free, then do a paywall, see what happens, and take it from there. So that's kind of the first year, and it was a lot of ups and downs. A lot of COVID actually hit before we did the paywall. We launched Android at the same time. We did a little bit of fundraising because once you start looking at Android and scaling a little bit, you start looking at like, okay, now we're going to do some expos and maybe a couple contractors here and there. So we did a little fundraising, but not much.
How did you get those first customers?
Well, at the Fly Fishing Expo, that's when we launched it. So we got probably 500 customers just at that expo. Again, it's easy if you're giving someone a product that they just absolutely love and they're willing to pay for, and you're doing it for free. I mean, it's not a good. It might not be a good business play. I've heard a lot that if I did it over, I would charge earlier. But it was a really good way to get a very core niche audience into your system and get feedback really quick. Because you're putting up the money, you're putting up the time, you're giving it to them free, get that feedback, and then figure out how to monetize. Don't figure out how to monetize, but execute your plan to monetize after the fact. Yeah.
So where are you guys at today? Like, where is Trout Routes at today?
So we launched, long story short, I mean, we have the entire country completely mapped out. We just finished that 2 months ago. So we started off in Minnesota, then we added 6 states, 7 states here, 4 states. We monetized, and now we have a fully mature product on iOS, Android, and on the website. So it's a full multi-platform, pretty mature product for all 3 platforms for the whole country. This year we did 15 expos. So part of our go-to-market strategy is really getting in front of a niche, highly engaged audience and getting them to understand and to purchase the product in person. Idea being that they're more likely to have a higher LTV if they see you in person, even though it's more expensive. So yeah, we have now 6 employees, 2 part-time. We have a full office here in Minneapolis. So it's been quite a ride.
What would you say, number one, I have 2 questions. What is, in your opinion, the competitive advantage for Trout Routes versus other mapping softwares? And number 2, what's next for you guys? What can people who use Trout Routes or are interested in using it, what can they expect in the future?
Yeah, for the first question, I would say for quite a long time, there really wasn't anyone doing mapping at all in fly fishing. So we really were kind of a first mover advantage. And it was great. And it was pretty surprising because, I felt like the industry was in such need of a mapping based product. I'm going to compare it to onX because that's a great reference. I mean, they've paved the way for hunting in ways that I would love to for fly fishing. I mean, I look up to them every day. And so for fly fishing, there really wasn't any competition. And so for a while, the benefit of us versus onX in fly fishing is that we are making a product specific to us as anglers for trout. So we're going to create a user experience and a feature set that you won't get in onX, that you won't get in Gaia, that you won't get in AllTrails. And so we create a pretty unique experience that really fit the needs of our consumers better than anyone else could have because we were specific to fly fishing. Now, fast forward to today, there's a few new players, and I think the fact that we have developed a core competency in what we consider like GIS allows us to have scale that covers more things than you can do with a highly curated approach. And so I think what we do is kind of a combination of like our hardcore GIS competency combined with some curation validation. And I think that approach has allowed us to create a unique differentiator where we have every trout stream in the country versus just a couple. And I think people have definitely resonated with that.
I mean, that was my favorite part about it when I started using it was because I'm in Wisconsin and there's tons of lakes, tons of streams, tons of water, but I had no idea which ones had trout in them. So to be able to look and see, okay, this is where I actually want to go if I want to catch trout was massively helpful and just took like so much time wasting away from me to be able to like just pull it up and be like, oh, nice, there's a stream over here I can go try. Or out of the 10 that there are, I know which one to actually go to. It was super helpful.
Yeah, we hear a lot of really cool stories from users. And I think like one way to look at it is like instead of being a curated list of the top places to fly fish in Wisconsin, which is useful, What we are is an absolute reference of every single piece of information you need for anywhere you want to fish for trout. So it's kind of this like absolute mentality where if you want to know if a stream has trout, you can use Trout Routes to be pretty damn sure. And by the way, we'll have every single parcel of land that's publicly accessible mapped out. And we go to extreme lengths to have things like fishing easements, state parks, national parks, everything. So I think one of the key differentiators is that we are trying to be like the absolute correct reference for every place where trout live. And that's one reason why we haven't gone into lakes, to be honest, because I don't want to add lakes until we're perfect at it. I don't want to add a couple of lakes. I want to add all of them, do that right. We're really focused on do one thing really, really well before you do other things.
Yeah, I think that's a great strategy. I mean, we deal with a lot of that same stuff too, and we talked about it earlier, is how do you make those calls? And at the end of the day, just building a really great product for your customer base and knowing the way that they're using it is going to set you apart from others. And being able to keep checking with them and being able to make sure that you do one thing really, really well before you try and do 10 things less well is always going to be a good strategy. So what can people expect next within the coming years for Trout Routes? And then what's kind of next for you? And how long do you want to do this?
Yeah, I mean, now that we finished the whole country, a big internal debate is what do we do next? And I think I think part of us were really trying to get to that key milestone of having the country mapped out as quickly as we could. For like very excited, like everyone's very excited about trouts in Minnesota and Colorado and Pennsylvania. The biggest question we always asked was, when can you have this interstate? Which is a cool point of feedback. Once we finish that, it's always about what's next. And I think where we're really heading is to just really continue to focus on our product. I think there's so many cool things that we've been working on that are continuing to build on the value of our product for the core audience that we have versus getting distracted and doing other things. So, I mean, honestly, we're kind of going back and saying we kind of fast-tracked the geographical expansion part of it. Now let's go back and really do our product right. Let's really kind of clean up the user experience, the UI, add the features that we're missing. So from the consumer perspective, they're going to see a ton of new value added on Trout Routes for the things they already use. So it's going to be pretty cool.
That's awesome. I guess, how do you feel the fly fishing industry is growing? And what is kind of your overall opinion on the growth of fly fishing and the outdoor industry as a whole? Because, it's an interesting perspective that you have as someone who is obviously very passionate about the outdoors and in the outdoor industry, but also in software, which tend to kind of conflict. So what's kind of your overall opinion on where the fly fishing industry and the outdoor industry is going and the role that it plays for people?
I mean, first, I think, obviously there's been a lot of growth during COVID. And I think when I've talked to folks that have been in it for a long time, they don't see this constant growth curve. They see events that lead into growth spurts that kind of recede. So I'm not too worried about overgrowth. And that's a huge point by itself. I think some people are very concerned about overgrowth in the sport. Now I'm talking specifically about fly fishing. And in terms of the role of software and the role of technology in general in the outdoors, I kind of liken it to AI. And I'll kind of explain what I mean by that. I think the technology has the potential to completely be a game changer in a positive way if done correctly and responsibly. I think equally it has the potential of being catastrophic if not done carefully. And I think people talk about that in the same way they talk about AI, where if this could be terrible, it could be great, we just don't know. And so for me, part of what drives me honestly at Trout Routes is I feel like technology has the potential of really making our lives better in angling. I think we can become not just more informed and not just better at angling and have a better experience. But I think as not just the industry grows, but as the industry kind of replaces itself with just age, honestly, Trout Routes or something like it has the potential of creating better conservationists at a younger age. So think about if you're a brand new angler in the industry, if you're using some sort of technology that isn't carefully designed, you're going to create this group of people that are newer into the industry that are going to not be great for it. They're not going to understand fish handling. They're not going to understand, private public access. They're not going to understand temperature control and all these other things that are very important to conservation. And so by having a key position in the digital space for fly fishing, we can kind of control and have influence on how that influences the growing population of fly fishing. So I think it's a delicate thing. I think, you can imagine we're in the forefront of a lot of different opinions on it. But I do believe that we have the potential and the responsibility to do it really well for the benefit of the outdoor space.
I think that makes a lot of sense, because a lot of times when things are done wrong for conservation within fishing, a lot of times it's just a lack of knowledge that they're doing something wrong. So if you guys can be at the forefront of providing that knowledge, then I think that that's a very cool goal to have, and something that a lot of anglers will resonate with as well.
What are your thoughts on it?
Within kind of the because we're in the same industry, but we play in a little bit different spaces. We like to be able to, we like to think that a lot of the times guides, and I think actually in a way we're similar in this, because trout routes is one option to get your foot into the door to get started in fly fishing. Another option is to go and get a guide. And I think if both of those can be good resources to be able to learn how to fly fish the right way and be careful, and have conservation in mind, then we're going to have a overall better educated outdoor community. And I think the fact that you guys are doing your part to help the do-it-yourselfers be able to be better anglers and conservationists, and we're out there trying to work with guides who have similar values as us, with conservation in mind. I think that together we cover a pretty good segment of the new anglers that are coming into the space. And I think that it's something that's being more conscious and in the minds of a lot of people these days. And it's also something that's really important, the role that fishing and the role that hunting play within the outdoor conservation industry, and space, because I think that that's something that's very misconstrued. If you want to protect the outdoors, you have to have people who care about it within it, who are willing to put money up for it, for licenses. And the people who want to protect it are the people who utilize it. And that's always going to be the case. And, I will always be a proponent of hunting and fishing, and some of the other activities that we do in the outdoors are the greatest protection of the outdoors. And I think that that's something that is missed by a lot of people who are not necessarily within the space. But that's my opinion. It might be a controversial one for some, but I do think that as outdoorsmen who care about the resource, utilize the resource, we have a duty to protect it. And I think that you guys are doing cool things to make that happen. So it's been very fun to be able to see what you guys have done, even in just the recent months. I know we bumped into each other at trade shows a bunch, but I learn a lot from you every time that we speak, and I appreciate you coming on and talking with me about this, and hopefully we can do it again.
For sure. I got a couple of questions for you.
Yep.
If that's cool.
Yeah.
The first, I know that you hunt and fish.
I do.
And you do a lot of things outdoors. So I'm curious, I guess 2 parts. One, what is the birth story of Go Guides? And 2, during that initial stage, did you consider other verticals? And if so, how did you pick fly fishing?
So the birth story, I always kind of joke about the birth story of Go Guide being that I was really just trying to not be a dentist. I come from a family of dentists, and I was pre-dental, supposed to be a dentist, but I loved the outdoors, and I wanted to figure out how I can make money in the outdoors. And I also, as much as I love the outdoors, I really like business. So I wanted to figure out how I can combine the two of them. So I was looking for a high leverage opportunity within the outdoor space. And where it actually started for me was that I was in college and I was driving Instacart. I was driving Uber in the summers because I never wanted to get a real job and I wanted to be able to go skiing and fishing and surfing whenever I wanted to, which drove my parents nuts. Um, and I kept kind of thinking to myself that if those platforms and marketplaces could blow up and there was people who were willing to do that, like there's got to be a more fun way to do this. Like I live on the lake. There's a bunch of people who come up from Chicago every summer into northern Wisconsin. And I'm sure if I had a profile and a way to get in front of people, like someone would let me take them fishing or take them surfing on the weekends. And I could make money doing that versus like driving Instacart and Uber. So it started with me wanting to create a profile to be able to make money doing what I actually liked to do. And then the other flip side of that was that when I was in college, I really wanted to get into fly fishing and I really wanted to get into elk hunting. And I just wasn't meeting anyone who would teach me how to do it. So there was this barrier to entry into these new activities in the outdoors that even though I was an outdoorsman in other ways, I really wanted to do. Um, so that was kind of where the seeds were planted. Um, my original concept of what I wanted to build was a marketplace to connect people like me who want to just create a profile and be able to make money, taking people fishing or surfing or hunting or whatever it might be, and have people who would be looking for those trips be able to book more local experiences. That was my original idea. I had a very good mentor in college by the name of Brad Warner. When I pitched him the idea, he asked me what my missions were. And I said, my first mission is that I want to enable more people to make a living doing what they love in the outdoors. My second mission is that I want to connect more people to the outdoor experiences that have shaped my life and lower that barrier to entry. And he said, which one's more important to you? I said, I think the helping people make a better living doing what they love in the outdoors part. And he said, great, don't reinvent the wheel. Go solve the people's problems who are already doing that. So I started walking into guide shops and fly fishing shops, climbing companies, tour operators, pretty much anyone who was already making money in the outdoors. I wanted to figure out what their problems were so that I could try and solve them. And that's kind of what took us down the road of building what we have today to help those individuals and those companies be able to run their business more effectively, help take some of the back end pain of running the business off of their shoulders. And in doing so, I never lost sight of the vision of wanting to create a marketplace and a connection point to the outdoor experiences, that I think are valuable for people to have. And by luck or by strategy, the way that we went about doing it, I think is going to lead to a much higher quality of experiences on our marketplace and on GoGuide because we're able to work with the best of the best within the industry because we solve the business problems of the best within the guiding and the tourism industry. So that's kind of how it evolved. And, we've had some things along the way too that have helped with that. Like when I first started going into fly shops, one of the things that I noticed was that there was a discrepancy between the way that customers were booking online and the way that they were booking over the phone and in person. Over the phone and in person, I found that customers were requesting a specific guide because they'd either been there before or they'd been recommended by someone else that they should go with this guide. And no one had ever built a system for the online piece of it to be able to select the guide that you want to go with, even if you're working with an outfitter, which then I would love to say that I planned this out perfectly, but I did not. It just was kind of a luck of the draw side effect. Once we built the book by guide system where customers could actually book the guide from the outfitter that they wanted, what it did was it automated the entire scheduling process for the managers and the owners of guide services because what they were spending their time doing previously was matching customers to guides and trying to make that communication piece happen. When we built the book by guide system, it was in the hands of the customers, and then it went directly into the guides, and the outfitters, the owners and the managers didn't have to do the back end scheduling piece. So we kind of by luck fell into that really big benefit, and were able to keep kind of my original mission and morals behind what I was doing intact by still making it about the individual that was like me, who just wanted to make money in the outdoors, helping them be able to do that, and still being able to build a marketplace of the best experiences for customers.
It's a really cool story. And
It's
was
evolved.
yeah, was there a point where you considered taking the book by guide system into other verticals before you did the fly fishing? Or I'm still curious. I'm like, at what
Yep.
point did you decide fly fishing versus hunting?
Yeah. So this is another one of those like dumb luck and a little bit of strategy answers. When my mentor told me to go find the people who are already making a living doing what they love in the industry, at the time in college, I happened to live right in between two fly shops. Like 3 blocks to the north, there was a fly shop, and like 6 blocks to the south, there was another fly shop. So those were just the first two that I kind of walked into, and I, half lied and said I'm doing a school project, and I asked some questions. And that was where I kind of started the journey of learning how they operate their business. That's where I saw kind of the opportunity with the book by guide system come to fruition. So it made sense to be able to go into that industry to prove that concept. But also in talking to some other activities in the industry, the fly fishing industry to me was like the most underserved, that we could gain traction the fastest. It was kind of lagging behind with online booking more than any other space, where online booking was literally the growth of the outdoor tourism industry in the past 3 years. So like since COVID, customers are more conducive to booking online. However, fly fishing had a very small segment of people who were using an online booking system compared to other industries. So that was an opportunity that we saw. It also is an industry that has high crossover with other activities. So the guy who goes and books a $2,000 fly fishing trip, with his buddy, is probably going to go take his kids on spring break, and they're going to go on a dolphin excursion or a kayak tour. So there's high industry crossover. He might do a duck hunting trip in the fall. So I thought that if we entered fly fishing, we could get access to a customer base that was probably going to be booking other trips. And it was one of the top 3 growing pastimes of the ultra wealthy. So I knew that the people who were booking fly fishing trips would be qualified and capable of booking other experiences. So it was a combination of dumb luck that I happened to be by 2 fly shops when I first kind of started the journey. And then whether I rationalized it because it was accessible, or whether that actually played a good role into my decision, there was a lot of strategic advantages to going after fly fishing first, and then using what we do in fly fishing to prove the model and then expand into other industries.
Very cool.
Yeah. Anything else? I know you got to jump.
Yeah, we'll probably save it for round 2.
Cool. I appreciate you doing this. It was fun. It's fun to catch up on what you guys are working on, and be able to see what you guys are doing. And I'm sure we're going to have some more opportunities to do this, and hopefully some other exciting stuff going forward too, between Trout Routes and Go Guides.